Would anyone like to go first with a hot headline of their own that they found sometime over the weekend, perhaps? Hang on, someone's trying to talk, and that's JT. Maybe it's my speaker, JT. Let's find out. Can you count to 10, JT, please?
Yeah, one,
There you
two,
go. You're good.
three.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I read an article that explained that Apple was not interested in getting into the metaverse, and this was coming from NBC's Mark Gurman, who posted a newsletter.
Did Mark Gurman
saying
go?
that
Mark Gurman used to be at Bloomberg. Did he go over to NBC?
Oh wait, I don't know which. Sorry, I don't know which company he works for. Bloomberg, I'm guessing then.
Yeah.
So he posted a newsletter that said that Apple was not interested in the metaverse and that it was off limits. And so that was very interesting because a lot of companies are trying to get into the metaverse, and then we hear that Apple, this rumor that they're not interested in getting into that instead they're looking to do more sort of short, bite-sized piece experiences. So something to just think about and digest and see if this comes out to be true or not.
Okay, so I found that article by Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, dated yesterday, and it's his kind of weekly wrap-up where it talks about several things about Apple, and it starts. I pinned it to the top of the Clubhouse room, so Cheryl, if you could steal it from there and pin it to the top of the Twitter space, that would be fantastic. And because we're on both apps simultaneously. And Mark says, hey everyone, it's Mark. Apple could shake up the fintech world with an Apple Card expansion. Yeah, and banks have been pooping their pants over this idea for years, that Apple's going to get into the banking space and compete with them directly. Checking accounts and more. Nothing scares banks more than the idea that Apple's going to start having checking accounts, by the way. Also, Google goes after Apple's ecosystem strategy. Sony previews a car, and Apple gets ready for its first launch of 2022. So this is Mark's weekly wrap-up, which he has a name for it. I forget what they call it. Anyway, so on the topic of the cards, he says over 1 billion people already use the iPhone to digitally manage key parts of their lives. That includes monitoring their health data, controlling their home, and even starting their BMW. But the one area of daily life where Apple hasn't gone as far as it should is financial management. Well, that's certainly not what the banks think. The banks are praying and hoping Apple never does this. And I know this for a fact because I've had meetings with them because they sponsor my events, very specifically Swedbank, Nordea, Danske Bank, Deutsche Bank have all sponsored my events. And when I meet with them, one of the things that unites them all is their fear that Apple's going to go into banking. It's their biggest fear of all of their fears. And they've been fearing this for years, actually. So Mark says, that's not to say the company hasn't done anything. In 2014, Apple launched Apple Pay, which is now the most used U.S. mobile payment system. In 2019, it launched the Apple Card. It's been well received, but it's no smash hit. With its relationships with banks, credit card and checking account data for consumers, an image of trustworthiness and privacy, and a history of taking complex tasks and making them simple, Apple has the building blocks to turn the iPhone and its ecosystem into the ultimate financial management tool. First, Apple needs to launch its credit card outside the US. Second, Apple has a lot of work to do on Apple Card itself. And more importantly, it should continue working out the kinks in its back end with Goldman Sachs to make sure consumers get proper credit limits and aren't rejected for arbitrary reasons, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Tyler, can I just make a point on this issue?
Go ahead.
For years it was rumored that Walmart was going to get into banking, and they never really did. There's something called the Bank Holding Company Act in the United States, and I'm not going to nerd out on it because, first of all, my recollection of it is spotty at this point. But basically, what the Bank Holding Company Act does, it means that if you own a bank, it restricts your other types of activities that you can do. So you can't really run different, whether it's a Walmart or a computer company or whatever, you're really restricted in terms of other types of businesses. I mean, you could probably manage around it, but they make it very onerous to basically be to be in banking and other industries at the same time, because first of all, the experience in the United States once or twice when that has happened has not been good. That was basically in the SNL days, where the restrictions on savings and loans were somewhat different. We had Dr. Francine's on stage, so she probably remembers when the utility company in Arizona ended up buying a savings and loan. Right, it was a Pinnacle West
Oh,
bought.
yeah. Pinnacle West. That's right.
Yeah, boy, yeah, that didn't work out very well. Um, and that so yeah, everybody talks about these things, and people were talking about Walmart for years, and it hasn't happened. So that's probably why. And I'm done speaking.
Well, and my guess is that Apple is going to have to get into non-bank banking, which is kind of where it's been headed up until now, before it can get into actual banking. I mean, what's the point in getting into an industry that's as restricted as banking when maybe they should be getting into crypto and, crypto tra- crypto trading and remittances and stuff like that, because that's really where the future is. But on the other hand, Apple doesn't get into the future, it gets into the now. And so PayPal is thinking of getting into the future. So if PayPal is thinking of going somewhere, Apple may be thinking of going there.
I would say, as an Apple user and credit card holder, it's amazing product service. The credit card. I mean, I have multiple credit cards. The card does things like in the app and integration with Apple Pay that like no other card will do. So, and also Apple Pay is like a magical product. I'm surprised more people don't use it. So I think if they just keep doing that in the device, in the OS, they're going to be pretty successful.
Right, and just stay away from banking. I mean, half the United States, I don't know about the rest of the world. I'm sure this is more true of the rest of the world, but even half of the United States is unbanked, and everybody thinks about trying to get them banked, but they're never going to because they're younger and they don't want to be banked.
Okay, so back to the original point that JT brought up about Mark Gurman and the Apple's metaverse ambitions. And Nicholas is on stage in Twitter Space, so he might be useful in this conversation. So if you could raise your hand, Nicholas. It says Apple's widely expected to take off the wraps of its first mixed reality headset this year, with a focus on augmented reality and virtual reality experiences. While many companies, including Meta, are doubling down on the idea of a metaverse, a new report today indicates that Apple's focus is quite the opposite. In the latest edition of his newsletter, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reports that he's been told pretty directly that the idea of a metaverse is off limits internally at Apple. This, of course, is a stark difference from the strategy of companies like Facebook. And there's a quote. It says, "Here's one word I'd be shocked to hear on stage when Apple announces its headset, metaverse. I've been told pretty directly that the idea of a completely virtual world where users can escape to, like they can in Meta Platforms, Facebook's vision of the future, is off limits from Apple. Instead, Apple's focus is said to be on mixed reality headset that is used for, quote, bursts of gaming, communication, and content consumption, but it will not be, quote, an all-day device. Current rumors indicate that Apple's first augmented reality and virtual reality headset could be announced as soon as this year. It's expected to feature a high-tech design with an innovative 3-display configuration. It also expected to be more expansive than the competition, with a rumored price of around $3,000. So, welcome back, Jeremiah. I know Jeremiah's got a health tech-related thing, and then Nicholas, I'm curious what you've heard, if anything, about Apple's. Give us the latest of whatever you might have heard around the Apple space. So far, the only thing that seems rather bankable is that they're going to launch it at the September event when they would normally launch the next iPhone. And
Tyler,
yes.
The only thing that I heard about metaverse, quote unquote, related, is a virtual environment for productivity. So I read a patent that focused on wanting to create a virtual environment, almost like Meta's Horizon and workrooms, where you would be able to meet with people from the office or whatever, and you would have avatars and such and such. That's the only thing that I've read about, being metaverse related.
Yeah. Well,
other than that, haven't really read much.
I've got a little additional context that I saw an interview with Tim Cook. I forget who was interviewing him. And the question was about, actually, it was Kara Swisher. And she said, what about VR? And Tim said, well, we're really excited about AR. And he even said he thinks it's the future of the company. It was like very strong words, like surprisingly strong words, but it wasn't VR. And it seemed like he intentionally, the impression I was getting as I was listening to and enjoying the interview was that they're even a little bit worried about what full-on VR, how big of a what's the word I'm looking for? How isolating it sort of is physically, and they want something where that you could walk around outside and engage and live what they think might be healthier lifestyle related to AR than with full-on VR, where you're kind of hiding in your closet all day. So that's I wish somebody would do a deeper dive with Tim Cook on that particular question and issue, because it seems like they already it sort of seemed like it was an extension of how Apple gave you like a weekly reports of how much time you're spending on your devices and the apps in each of those devices and the data within those devices and how they track you. And I get the feeling they're already consciously erring on the side of caution with regard to not only what the device itself is capable of, but what the apps inside the device will be capable of. And I think they're already a little concerned with what, for example, video games and social networks might be doing to people. And naturally, the difference between the tiny little screen we all have in our hands and the screens that will be, glued to our faces, or, that encompass our entire vision and, in fact, our reality, the impacts are, an order of magnitude more intense. So any kind of issues that one might believe are a result of social media apps or TikTok or video games and the negatives that come along with, of course, there's positives as well. But the positives and negatives that came through the smartphone will be amplified and magnified 10x when we go into the VR version of that. And I think Apple is contemplating if that's not necessarily a good thing. And where with AR, you get a lot of the benefits of the VR with the interactivity and productivity and on and on and on, and maybe minimizes a bit of the negative aspects of VR, like the kind of inherent isolation, as an example. Anyway, so but
Tyler,
You
I'm
mean like
not even
milking the
sure.
cow?
yeah, well, it goes, and pardon my interruption, just to finish the thought and loop it back to the beginning, which is Mark Gurman saying that he's heard it more or less directly, that exactly something that jives very well with what I was just expressing, which is Apple's the metaverse is kind of verboten and off limits at Apple, and they have no interest in the metaverse, and they're very interested in mixed reality, which is sort of a homonym for augmented reality. So
I mean, why would they go around with Facebook's rebranding campaign? They successfully thwarted how much basically negative PR with this name rebranded, then say everyone, look, here's the shiny target. Look, everyone, aim for the target. Don't pay attention to all the regulatory policy and everything being shaped to the site. It's been highly successful. Now almost no one's talking about privacy stuff on Facebook, and they're talking about metaverse this, metaverse that. I think Apple's just going, yeah, we're not putting up with that shit. They already have a version that they're building out. They've already invested billions of dollars into. So why would they abandon that just because Zuckerberg's having a bad press day?
But I think it's even further than that. Like they're going to offer platforms that allow other companies who are building metaverses to exist on their platform and take some sort of percentage, the way they do with the iOS store, like the Apple Store. And I think it's going to be more of that. Here's the platform. You guys go out. You guys build the metaverses. We're not going to be involved with it, but do it on our platform, and we'll take a piece of it. And thank you very much.
I don't think that we should assume that developer ecosystems are permanent into the future. They were a nice hack to rapidly scale systems, but they're no guarantee that they go into the future, especially as they become more highly regulated. There's some interesting things happening with AI generation and procedural generated content. There's some interesting things happening with being able to have more, like, I don't want to use the word decentralized because it's the wrong context in this one, but being able to have more localized small community versions of things where you don't have scaled out to large context. There's some other things being happened with micro content. There's a lot of different ways to do things that do not require large developer communities, and I think that more, especially as companies start re-embracing localized manufacturing, they're going to find that you don't necessarily need to innovate on the software as much with a limited hardware stack. They're going to basically put more of the innovation into the hardware side, which does not traditionally favor large developer communities. But yeah, just
That's exactly my point.
showing
Yeah.
different alternative pathways that might be embraced.
What I've heard is that they're going to put out, and I've heard it from several sources. One of which is Scoble, who's been following this for a very long time, and he says that Apple is going to put out not a headset, but glasses, and that they're looking for augmented reality. He's looking for in 2022 the launch of augmented reality glasses, which would make sense because they would be things that you could use out in the world, and developers could build games on them like Pokemon Go or whatever, and people wouldn't mind wearing them because they wouldn't look like fools.
The joke is that essentially, for anyone that says Apple's going to release the augmented reality headset thing, they've been literally saying they're going to release it this quarter or next quarter or next quarter and next quarter. These headlines go back to like 2017, and it's hilarious because
They
whenever you see
must
one of
be
those
having
headlines,
problems.
well, the thing is they've got like 18 different products they've basically been developing internally. They're not, in, Johnny Ive couldn't decide which way he wanted to go. One of the things internally is the for people that have been in the space for a little while, there's an older device called iTap, which was made by, I think it was a Stanford professor, Steve Mann, I think it was. And so what he does, he basically wear this, this cyborg headset, and he never takes the thing off. And he's been doing this since like in the late '90s. He gets assaulted at McDonald's and stuff like that when they're like, "Oh, what kind of freak are you?" And he's like, "It's cyborg discrimination." Anyways, the thing about it is that when you wear a device that has a persistent field of view communication, one of the things that you start to realize is that there are some types of information that are a lot more useful than others. One of the arguments made that Steve Bannon came up with was he was saying that, if you only, for the vast majority of communications, you don't need full field of view. You don't need to cover up every single pixel going into someone's retina. You can work with just a small little rectangle off to the side, kind of like more a Google Glass type kind of style. He says the real important part that's really difficult to nail is nuance or context. Being able to actually sense what the user is actually doing, why they're doing it, and being able to offer the right information at the right time. And that doesn't magically go away just because you've got 3D sensors and 3D displays that can project holographic 8K images into each eye. You still don't know what the hell is going on and why that person walked over to the kitchen. Was it to basically pick up a food item, or was it to essentially just turn off the stove? Unless you have the persistent sensors or the inbuilt state machine, like kind of awareness of what the world is and how it works, like more common sense reasoning, a lot of this just doesn't actually work. You have a cool tech demo, you get some investor money, but ultimately it's the limitation of the real world somewhat limited. So inside Apple, where they actually do extensive user testing in so many different environments, they're running into the same issue where they're saying, yeah, we can do essentially a mixed reality pass-through display that can do all this crazy stuff, but will people actually use it? So they create these internal little testing labs and people try all these different things. Meanwhile, an alternative product, I think Johnny Ive was personally very attached to, was more of a Google Glass style, where it's a lot more lightweight. And they're just trying to basically do context sensitivity. But again, the problem is, how do you actually get that data in a privacy preserving way? And that's a real struggle. It takes a lot to do that. One last thing before closing here. Microsoft, when they were doing their experiments for HoloLens, they invested, it was ridiculous how much money they spent on this. They invested like $200 million just on retrofitting at like 7 or 8 of their main headquarters buildings. They literally like poured concrete in the basement, like put the secret little like R&D, like inside the secret R&D lab. And what they did is they created these almost like a warehouse style, where they created like these little micro versions of like a little schoolhouse or a little coffee shop or a little bus station, or about like 100 different like contexts of real world conditions that you might run into that you might want to experiment with. And so what this did is it meant that when they're wearing these augmented reality headsets, they can kind of walk around and say, okay, what would it be like if I'm sitting in this context and I interact with people in this social way? What are ways that we can augment the environment? What are data sources we can do? What are sensors we can put on the platform? And that's how the way they can kind of like prototype with that and run through the scenarios without having a bunch of leaks about what they're actually doing. So $10 billion down the drain, you can actually get a pretty good idea of how people will use it. But the thing is that very few groups are willing to put that sort of investment money in. And once you do, you're going to have a really, really, really specific idea of what you want to implement. And you might not coordinate with other people's plans. This is one of the big challenges if you want to do some sort of swap all your data metaverse type kind of thing, which the world really is ready for. And we're only doing because essentially Zuckerberg needs some good PR. All right, anyways, that's a long rant, but hope that's helpful.
So I just,
Hey, Colin, can we move on to another headline?
yeah, just real quick, I found Robert Scoble's tweet thread, and I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. I'll just summarize real quickly. He says, "What the
So,
first?"
Tyler, sorry, can I comment on this Apple headset thing?
Yep, that's what we're talking about. Hold on.
Okay,
It
so
says,
literally, I believe that Apple is kind of doing the right thing for using this headset for the burst of gaming or maybe intermittent activities, as opposed to a long-term all-day approach, because that means they are considering the mental health of human beings. All-day approach, where other devices are promoting continuous long-term use. This device is kind of focusing on maybe short-term burst-based activity, which is conducive of having more fun and preserving the mental and cognitive functions that align with good or better psychological health. So I
Or are
kind
they
of
only saying that because they've only realized how to have 1 hour worth of battery at a time?
no, that's
that is possible,
slightly
but
sympathetic.
even then, it doesn't matter. The thing is that if we are to go forward with the metaverse a type of situation, virtual reality and all, we need to keep our human biology and psychological and mental health and well-being in mind. And just like any other activity, short burst of exercises, 1 hour of intense physical activity or mental stimulation is far more superior as opposed to long-term continuous activation, because that results in fatigue, and that results in a lot of mental and psychological adverse health outcomes.
Okay, so I wanted to read Robert Scoble's tweet thread on this topic. And as Francine knows, and we both know Robert personally, I think Jeremiah in Twitter Spaces does as well. We all kind of, spend a lot of time. Matter of fact, I have memories of, I believe, well, there was a lot of mutual friends. It might have been, I remember a South by Southwest that got very fun with Robert and Jeremiah and many others. Anyway, Robert is an Apple fanboy like no other, and has been for a very long time, and he's obsessed with where it's always going, and particularly on this issue of AR, VR, mixed reality. And so in his tweet thread, and he lives, not far from Apple HQ, and has a lot of friends that works there, and tries to investigate more than any, but rather thoroughly what's going on.
Before he
And
got Me Too'd, he was like, it was a bit of a bit of a thing that your company was at a status where you can give the Scopal demo and then essentially give you free PR with stuff. So
yeah,
he knows everyone that's working in the mixed reality space. He got
yeah,
Me Too'd
Right.
about a few
And
years ago
he
on something
wrote a
really
book.
stupid.
He
yeah,
wrote a book about AR and VR.
yeah. He's very passionate on the topic. To put,
Infinite Retina.
yeah,
So I was JT and I were actually in a Twitter space with him and a few other people, what, 3 or 4 days ago, having this exact discussion about why Apple hasn't. So I can add some stuff, Tyler, once
okay,
you finish.
all right. So here's his tweet thread a few hours ago. He says, "Why Apple is not all caps doing glasses as its first AR wearable coming this year. No, most people in the AR VR industry over-index on walking around computing. That belief that they should get people to walk around is one that fights real-world usage, particularly at home. My research shows a much bigger use case, which is high engagement computing while sitting down." He says, think about it. Where do you do the computing where you actually do something as opposed to, say, listening to music, which doesn't require any engagement at all? And then he breaks it down step by step. He says, home office work, you're sitting down. Gaming, you're sitting down. Photo editing, sitting down. Architectural design, sitting down. Evaluating performance, sitting down. Almost all creative work is done sitting down. Almost all engineering work is done sitting down. And he's making a strong argument that a lot of the heavy lifting that we do sitting down. And so that because of this, even watching movies, we do sitting down. When we're doing serious content consumption, it's usually done in a seated position. And as such, he says, playing board games, sitting down. Apple's real goal isn't to sell a headset. It's to get you to simply try it at the Apple Store. Why? Because you will instantly want augmented reality after you put it on. That will let them sell many different devices to you over the next decade. Glasses simply can't do it yet. And that's actually a really good point because, as he knows, and anyone who's tried the Microsoft HoloLens or Magic Leap knows, the wow factor just isn't there for the walk around AR glasses to do a lot of these mega use cases that we do with computers.
You
But they,
need maps, you need spatial data, you need whole data sets
yeah,
that don't exist yet or haven't been integrated
hard.
or haven't been formulated.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of missing
So
information.
that's a turnaround from what he used to say about glasses. So obviously, Apple has come to some conclusions.
So it's an interesting point, and I tweeted that tweet from the Tech News Twitter account TNATW. And by the way, that whole thread, this whole conversation thus far was instigated by JT, and it happens to be the second biggest story in my list of stories today. The first biggest story being from Business Wire that Take-Two Interactive will acquire Zynga for $12.7 billion, a 64% premium on Zynga's January 7 closing price of $9. I forget what the closing price was. Anyway, Take-Two is the developer behind Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead, and other major titles, and
They deserve each other.
they're they're buying Zynga. So that's the big story. The third biggest story, because the second one was the Mark Gurman rumor, mongering around Apple's mixed reality headset, is about Roblox from The Guardian. That Roblox's aim of encouraging children to make games has been its key to success, but it's fraught with dangers as some face stress, burnout, and exploitation. Young developers on the platform, used by many millions of children, claim they have been financially exploited, threatened with dismissal, and sexually harassed on Roblox, which is wildly popular. It's now publicly traded, and I guess the issue is that the users, many of them, are underage, and yet they're doing kind of work. And okay, so
And they can't collect any revenue if it's under $1,000, I believe. So most of them are very far away from that value.
Oh, they want the micro work strategy. That's really shitty of them.
So I'm just pinned the article to the top of the Clubhouse room. Hopefully Cheryl can pin it to the top of the Twitter space because we're streaming on both apps simultaneously, where we've got over 250 people in the Clubhouse room, and I have no idea how many are in the Twitter space. And we've got 26 speakers on stage in Clubhouse, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. And hello, good to see you again, Monica. And I see Nami, a friend of mine from Stockholm, in the Twitter space. And if you don't know Nami, you should, because he makes one of the biggest apps of 2021, which is Truecaller. From Stockholm, but the major market is India. No surprise, where we've been counting the unicorns in India for 2021. And Monica, maybe you know off the top of your head, as a unicorn counter of India, the official unicorn scorekeeper for India, I believe it got to around 45. And then there happened to be one on January 2nd, who I think brought it to 46. And that's just so incredible that it's led me to have deep dive meetings with some folks in Bangalore who lead some incubators there. And the plan is for me to go to Bangalore January 28th, just in a few short weeks, and host the first monthly tech meetup Bangalore, and start ramping up for a mega conference in November, in cooperation with the state. And Monica, you can remind me the name of the state for Bangalore. Kamalama. Karnataka. Thank you. And even with Mr. Modi himself and the innovation minister or technology minister who came to my event in Stockholm. And I couldn't be more excited about this. And I'm praying that Omicron doesn't disrupt this whole opportunity to put together a truly fantastic big conference in November. And I'm hoping Nami, being one of the top 5 apps in all of India that he has made there with Truecaller, would be a guest of honor and help get that whole party started. And yeah, Stockholm is incredibly proud of what Nami and Alan, his co-founder, have done with Truecaller in India. And India, it's amazing to see how much heat and momentum and fire. It's just what an incredible year they had in 2021, and it shows no sign of slowing down anytime soon. And the world is now standing up and taking notice, and it's just super exciting, as Monica well knows. So hopefully I will be there on January 28th. Fingers crossed. I literally got to book the tickets tomorrow. So to be continued on that point. And then the next big story, well, we're going on about the Roblox story. And this article that I pinned to the top of the Clubhouse room, has Cheryl pinned it to the top of the Twitter space? She did. Thank you, Cheryl. It says that young developers on the Roblox, which is a platform used by many millions of children, claim they have been financially exploited, threatened with dismissal, and sexually harassed. Anna was 10 when she built her first video game on Roblox, a digital platform where young people can make, share, and play games together. She used Roblox much like a child from a previous generation might have used cardboard boxes, marker pens, and stuffed toys to build a castle or a spaceship and fill it with characters and stories. There was one alluring difference. Roblox hosted Anna's tiny world online, enabling children she had never met with and who maybe live thousands of miles away from her home in Utah to visit and play. Using Roblox inbuilt tools, child-friendly versions of professional software, Anna began to learn the rudiments of music composition, computer programming, and 3D modeling. Game making became an obsession. When she wasn't at school, Anna was rarely off her computer. As she became more proficient, Anna's work caught the attention of some experienced users on Roblox, game makers in their 20s, who messaged her with a proposition to collaborate on a more ambitious project. Flattered by their interest, Anna became the 5th member of a nascent team, contributing art, design, and programming to the game. She did not sign up to make money, but during a Skype call, the game makers offered the teenager 10% of any profits the game made in the future. It turned out to be a generous offer. Within a few months, the game had become one of the most played on Roblox. For Anna, success had an unfathomable, life-changing impact. At 16, her monthly income somehow exceeded her parents' combined salaries. She calculated that she was on a course to earn $300,000 a year, a salary equivalent to that of a highly experienced Google programmer, and it canceled her plans to go to college. After, I can see why this is so upsetting now. This is truly a tragedy that children are making $300,000. This journalist is square on. What can
They
somebody
did it. They found the one story. They found one
they,
story, and they didn't even get that right.
these poor children making $300,000 doing what they obsessively would do for free? I mean, this is just a true
It's
tragedy.
like sending them into the mines. It's like little hands
What did John
making sweaters on the mills, back in the 18th century.
Yeah. So,
what did John Stewart say? Arson?
yes, arson. Yes. As she became more proficient, Anna's work caught the attention of some. Oh, I covered that paragraph already. Sorry. After it launched in 2006, Roblox was, for a while, a relatively obscure piece of educational software co-designed by two engineers, David Baszucki and the late Eric Castle, who became millionaires in the 1990s by designing and selling physics simulation software. Roblox was built as a playful method of teaching children the rudiments of game making. The roughly hewn, blocky aesthetics and ugly text that typified most user games on the platform were off-putting to adults, but children loved the fact that Roblox offered access to an endless stream of new and free experiences, a kind of YouTube for video games. Best of all, one's customized avatar could be used in any game on the platform, as if Super Mario could also moonlight as the hero in a FIFA, football, Call of Duty, or Pac-Man, a feature that made thousands of disparate games feel part of the same universe. Anyway, so I that's a really peculiar way to start an article that then somehow has the subheadline that young developers on the platform claim they've been financially exploited, threatened with dismissal, and sexually harassed. Okay, let's just be clear. The internet in general is perhaps, I mean, or any app, YouTube. Are we to assume that Roblox is going to be more or less or equally exploitative than Roblox, or leading to more or less sexual harassment? I imagine these are just functions of
Come
human
on,
beings.
Georgie, let's go. To the truck.
The point I want to make is I'm rather skeptical, just right off the jump, without having done any diving into this, obviously, that Roblox is going to be any more or less egregious on the issues of sexual
Come on, to the
harassment.
truck.
I don't think that Roblox is necessarily directly responsible for encouraging sexual harassment of folks. And of course, they should try and do their best to minimize those things. But again, this does fall. I think we can file this article rather squarely under the, the arson bin that our friend John Stewart coined, that journalists trying to make dumpster fires out of, dumpster fire mountains out of molehills, as the phrase goes. How concerned should we be about a 10-year-old making $300,000 a year exactly? Let me put it this way: do childhood stars on TV or film stars, like minors who are on TV shows, or pop stars who might be underage, as is actually common in Asia, do they not get a bit of sexual harassment? Is this just not a function of
Tyler, but with childhood actors, at least in the United States, there's all sorts of laws and rules about how they have to be dealt with, about either having tutors on set so
yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't
yeah,
miss
yeah.
education,
Okay,
about protecting their
good.
finances,
Yep,
and all sorts of
I
things.
get that. What I'm talking about
If
is
you're a predator, you're going to go to a site like Roblox, right? That's where you know the kids are, or Among Us, or what all the games that these kids are playing. That's where you would go if you were a child predator.
well, my point is that
But the problem is that kids are spending time on that game anyway, and if they are getting paid for it, what's wrong with that? That's not child labor because they're
They have to
already
make more than
doing that homework.
$1,000 to actually qualify to withdraw any of the funds, whereas other platforms have a cutoff around $10 or $100. So
Hmm.
No,
So
but
the fact that the
my point on the money is that this forget about the sexual harassment thing for a second. The other part of this article is that basically they cut off her economics. They basically almost like stole from her. You know, that wouldn't happen now conceptually with childhood actors because there's all sorts of laws, particularly in California, in place to protect the kids from being financially exploited because of a case from the like the 1930s or something from Jackie Coogan or something was a childhood actor, and I think his parents actually lost all of his money for him. You know, so there, you know, there's you know there's laws in place for that to deal with child actors. And so if you're going to use that example, maybe if we're going to let kids make all this money on video games, which is fine with me, there needs to be similar laws to make sure the kids are not financially exploited and that they're, you know, that they don't lose their IP rights and other stuff like that. That's all.
And maybe not financially exploited from their parents. Why would her parents want her to stop doing it?
No. I'm not saying in her case it was her parent. The case, I said the case that created the laws in the United States happened to be the.
You mean, like someone mentioned that there's $1,000 limit to the money that can be withdrawn, and then when you withdraw, how does the money go? It would have to go probably to your parents' account, or you're on an account where your parents are the guardians on the account, so the parents still have access to it. That's my.
it's not a maximum. It's a minimum. You have to have made at least $1,000 to qualify. And how much, as a proportion of all the children creating content, how many of those actually achieve that threshold? And other platforms have a lower threshold
Tyler, you're
for being
muted
able to
on
withdraw the
Clubhouse.
funding. That's the issue.
Yeah, Tyler, you're gone.
Yeah, but I muted on Clubhouse intentionally. Does that cause anybody problems? Oh, because he
no
was talking
problem.
on Twitter Spaces. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Eric. They didn't quite hear what you said. Thank you.
Oh, my bad. That's okay. I can repeat it. It's a threshold of $1,000 that you have to make before you can withdraw the funding. You can't withdraw any of the funds that you've made if it's below $1,000. Similar things exist on YouTube and other platforms, but in the metaverse, other platforms allow you to withdraw as low as $10 or $100 of revenue that you've earned. So it's quite a high threshold for children.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't have. I mean, I actually respect the point that somebody made about it could be, a real ripe target for children predators because it's such an active place for kids online, and I get that, and I no doubt they do too, and I guess, yep, the financial part is another interesting bit. I don't. I need to learn more about it before I start. I don't really have a well formed opinion because I really don't know. I haven't spent 10 seconds on it. I have spent exactly 0 seconds on it. So I'll defer to people who have to kind of speak more firsthand about it.
Well, Tyler, did you finish reading the article? Because it
No,
doesn't sound like. Okay.
no. The hard part of doing this now, after having done thousands of articles together as we have, um, just by reading the headline, the subheadline, and the first two paragraphs as we have, I can kind of get the sense of the dumpster fire the journalist is trying to make, and which is rarely under proper scrutiny holds up, and it has that smell kind of all over it. So I would love to talk with actual Roblox creators and users and directly to find out just how out of whack the journalist is in this case. I'll assume they're not, but our history of going through these articles generally leads us to conclude that the reality is quite far from what the journalist is trying to make out of this clickbait of again with a headline like child exploitation and sexual harassment. I mean, okay, yeah, maybe. The next article, if we should actually, before I read the next article, my friend Nami from Truecaller, who was on Twitter Spaces, just DM'd to say thanks for the shout out, bro. First time I tried Twitter Spaces, much love. Have to jump off now to get my son. Let's catch up soon. And I guess Monica and anyone from India in the audience knows Truecaller very well because, like I said, it's ranked in the App Store as one of the top 5 apps in all of India. But even though they're based in Stockholm, but no doubt Nami has helped my conferences in Sweden since they were a tiny startup, and I think it's safe to assume he'll help do a big conference with all the other unicorn founders in India in November. So that would be very exciting and good to see him in Twitter Spaces. And that's part of the reason, by the way, that the Twitter Spaces, why we do both apps simultaneously, because it's easier for my friends who, like Nami, who aren't in Clubhouse to engage with us through Twitter Spaces. And if we ever need to, if a story does come up about Truecaller, I can ping Nami, the CEO of Truecaller, and ping him into Twitter Spaces almost, anytime we would need to. And that's sort of, it's going to take time to develop the Twitter Space size like it did the Clubhouse side. Anyway, so the next article is an open source developer expressing regret for supporting Fortune 500 companies breaks 19,000 projects by corrupting a popular library. GitHub reverts the changes. Users of popular open source libraries were left stunned after they saw their applications broken by somebody who came in and broke the libraries. Okay, and then GitHub fixed it by just undo until everything was good again. So the next one's from The Verge, a roundup of Samsung Galaxy S22 series leaks, including specs and unboxing video of dummy units and alleged image of the S22 Ultra 45-watt fast charger. My goodness, are these chargers getting very big for these phones? I remember when a 20-watt charger was considered big, and now we're up to 45-watt chargers that'll charge your phone in, 10 to 15 minutes or something? Anyway.
There are 120 watt chargers now.
Careful, not.
Let's hope we don't have any repeat of the exploding Samsung Note 7. Yeah. That was a nasty experience. I mean, one of the reasons Apple hasn't gone with fast charging is they're worried about lithium batteries blowing up. One iPhone blow up is going to make headlines around the world, right?
Correct. And then next thing you know, no one's allowed to bring an iPhone on an airplane, and then you're really screwed. So the next one is linked from the Wall Street Journal. It says LinkedIn profiles and former employees say that about 100 people from Microsoft's HoloLens team have left in the past year, with over 40 joining Meta at Facebook. Okay. Is this an unknown source? And then let's see if Microsoft comes out and debunks it, as a similar headline was done last week, where it was said that, who was it? That Facebook is stopping their Meta operating system, and then the leader of that team came out and said, nope, that's not true at all. In fact, we're ramping up. So this one says, Microsoft hit by defections as tech giants battle for talent to build the metaverse. Around 100 people on the team developing Microsoft HoloLens augmented reality headsets have left, mostly to Facebook's parent, Meta. And that doesn't surprise me in so much as it seems that Meta is very much has its eyes and ears and mind and heart set on building and acquiring all of the best talent in the space, because it's core to the future of the company. That Mark Zuckerberg has really committed the vision of the future of the company on the metaverse, and as such is willing to do whatever's necessary to acquire all of the top talent under one roof, because the way talent works in tech is smart people want to be with the other smart people. So if you can get the top 1% of the smartest people, then it makes things incredibly much easier to get the rest. It's a bit of a snowball effect. And conversely,
and you
if you
also
don't have
block your competitors from getting them.
Sam, your mic sounds very like you're on an old AM radio for some reason.
Yeah, this is my ham radio interface to Clubhouse.
Okay. So, yeah, the talent issue is a big one, and Facebook knows that issue very well. And I think they're committing the finances to do it early and acquire the startups who are innovating, acquire the leading talent at the other companies to win this platform battle of this whole new era, which should go on, if history is any indication, for the next decade or more. 12, 13 years is how long the smartphone era went on, and 12, 13 years is how long the PC era went on before that. So I think it's a safe assumption that the whole AR, VR, MR space era will be similar. And now's the time to invest very heavily in getting all the top talent and building the best team, so that makes it easy to win that platform race, which Meta has been eager to be the leading player, like Google and Apple were on the smartphone era, or Microsoft and Apple were in the laptop era or the PC era. And they want to be the pole position in the metaverse era. And they're even changing the name of the company to the word, just to give you an indication of just how sincere they are in trying to dominate the space. So, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it at all. I wouldn't doubt for a second. In fact, I would bet very heavily that Meta recruiters at Facebook are doing everything they can, willing to offer pretty much anything to all the top talent at Microsoft HoloLens and any competitive company.
You know, Tyler,
Yeah.
can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different ways to read the tea leaves because it's really without knowing. Because a lot of another kind of way to read it is just people leave when the management is not so great either. So there's different lenses and different possibilities as well. I just want to put that out there.
Yes, sir.
There's exodus and recruitment, right? So that's what's kind of interesting as well.
Next article's from
Hey,
the
Tyler,
Verge.
let me try this again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you sound better. Yeah.
Okay, good. So just ditched my Surface Duo for trying it on a different device now. So when you hire the top talent, you basically block other companies from hiring them, and that's a double whammy because now you can move forward and stop others from catching up with you. So good for Facebook if that is truly the strategy that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the stakes are so high around the metaverse that if this turns out to be a defining moment for a dominant walled garden approach through Meta, Microsoft may end up looking like Xerox PARC vis-a-vis Apple in the early days.
Well, you know what? I've tried the HoloLens, not for a couple of years, but it's not something I would enjoy wearing. And I think they may have figured out that they've reached a dead end with the product. And that's why the people are leaving.
Hmm.
But it
It's
also
also very
feels like
heavy.
it's
I
still
think, especially for female users, the initial product testing didn't include a large base of females, and the difference in like neck muscles actually showed that there was increased levels of fatigue for female users. So, especially in one of the kinesiology classes where we had like 20 HoloLenses, the female students didn't even want to wear them, even though they were developing apps for them. So, it's quite unfortunate situation in that particular product because the potential was so high, but there was a few mistakes here and there, and that was one of the biggest ones, at least in my experience.
Also, not user friendly. I tried it on in a Microsoft store, and a Microsoft person had to be with me at all times because I never could figure out how to find my way around in it,
it is still a
despite
new,
having tested all this tech.
yeah, relatively it's still new technology. Whoever makes it doesn't make any difference. Still makes you look like a fool wearing it. So we're really way off until we get something that is really wearable, where people can actually wear it and not look like they're like from an old sci-fi movie. and people laugh at them. I'm sure our kids are going to laugh at our pictures with VR headsets on our heads, but in the future. But right now, I think technology still needs a lot of refinement before it's ready for prime time.
That's why I thought Apple would, would do it because Apple is really good at figuring out product design. But now Scoble says that Apple has abandoned the idea of glasses for now. So that's interesting.
I don't think Apple is going to
You guys
abandon
can you
that.
hear me
I
okay?
think
This is
they might
Dakota over
postpone
on
it.
Twitter Spaces, the first time talking through this side. I just wanted to hop in real fast because to this point, I've talked to you guys before in the past about my involvement getting into last March into the deepest parts of the builders, the developers of what was being built for the current Ethereum 2 NFT marketplaces. And my goal was to understand what the next generation was going to look like without fees and so forth. And I've gotten close to, I'm working as a CMO for a company called Access. And I've been involved in some meetings recently that have put me at the forefront with large sports leagues. And it's kind of opened my eyes to the realm of understanding that they know this technology we're talking about is coming. And the fact that they're building around the events and understanding how, not necessarily NFTs, I don't want to use that terminology over and over, but blockchain is going to be involved in these AR, XR realities. And it's definitely here. It's definitely coming. And I just wanted to bring that up with, I'm not sure how much I should share exactly who they are, but they're ones that we'd all know. So it's exciting.
Okay, so
As somebody who's been doing this stuff for decades, I'll just share some of the truisms. Sometimes these markets, I called interactive TV market the ever emerging market, because sometimes you will see waves and waves of VCs getting excited about a market, but it can take over 10 years to unfold. The wearables market it's tough. It's tough, but it's been around a long time now. So, I mean, changing the corporate name to Meta does not create the market, and we'll just kind of see. I mean, this is chapter, what have you. But it's we're all hopeful for it, so we'll see if that turns into the traction and get over the chasm of the early adopters, because that's really, it'll be interesting to see. But Dr. Francine, it is kind of awkward, it's where the classes for a certain segment of the population. So another kind of way to a perspective look at this is, sure, it's going to take off at some point, but is it going to take over a smartphone? I'm in the camp that it won't overtake a smartphone for a number of reasons, but it's going to be monstrous potentially. So I mean, how many millions of users? Let's get to define what is it that Oculus has to hit to make this really to start to turn the corner on it. But trust me, and I appreciate the Twitter space remark. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of money thrown at it, and hopefully something's going to pop, because it would be refreshing and very empowering in a bunch of different use cases.
Yeah, David, and as you guys are talking about, there's different use cases for these, right? Like there's not going to be one metaverse that everybody goes into. There's different environments. And so some of them are going to be, gaming. You can currently use them for fitness apps, meetings, and, people are using them for work meetings, kind of like Zoom, right? But where they can actually have, do prototypes within their virtual rooms, right? So there's a lot of different uses, and that's the way it's going versus this kind of nebulous one metaverse that people seem to be referencing. Okay.
Also the healthcare related uses. And my style suggestion would be to take a cue from Jodie LaForge in Star Trek, and if they can make it look like that, I would be using it.
okay,
I agree.
So,
It has to look good and it has to be usable. But beyond the gaming applications and beyond the minor things, I want to see these replace my displays. And now wherever I go, I have my 10-foot wall of displays that information that I can see, view, and it's not going to obscure my driving or anything. This needs a lot of thinking. This needs to be done right, and it needs to be done not as a game. As long as we're focusing on the entertainment side of things, we're not doing business. I want to be able to see an architect putting this thing on, helping him or her, build something or design something with ease. this needs to solve a problem. We need to get to the why. Why are we
You know,
going into this
Gaming
area?
leads the
so
boat
I
in
wore
this.
Google
Gamers just
Glass.
lead. Gamers just lead. They're the leads because they're ahead in this. It's not limiting it to game, right? You
Yeah,
already
yeah,
use a
yeah.
lot of
But
this in development.
right,
Well,
but the
I
thing is, as long as we don't have the why we're moving there, we're going to be just throwing things at it and see if it sticks. But at some
I
point, we'll be like, we can't do this without this thing. It is going to be the killer thing that without this, it is the best thing that happened to like this kind of industry. Let's go ahead and start building it. Otherwise,
I
it's going to
I
be pretty
actually
Can I
wore
difficult.
say
Google.
something quickly?
Anybody
Yeah,
want to
I
listen?
just wanted
Hold
to
on,
say a
Demolaire.
point
Demolaire, hold
about.
on.
We let Dr. Franz.
Yeah, Francine was going, and then Demolaire. Go ahead, Francine.
I wore Google Glass, and to my mind, it was wonderful because it gave me a connection to information that I really needed, and all I needed for them to develop, which I knew they had, but they were afraid to use for privacy reasons, was facial recognition, and I would have absolutely worn them forever. But the problem was social pressure, and that is something we really haven't talked about. I'd still be wearing them if the social pressure hadn't forced me to give them up.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Dem-
just wanted to say quickly. I just came into the room. I was on the Twitter Spaces, but I wanted to come on stage in Clubhouse instead. Um, but what I wanted to say is quickly is that on what is it Ali, I believe. Yeah, on what Ali was saying, the developer side just needs to grow, right? It's not necessary what Oculus is doing well, and I've actually had the chance to use them. I used them over the weekend, played in Gravity Sketch, and realized that I can do all of what you're saying, right? You creating architecture or even designing a car or a pair of trainers. Like, I love industrial design, so that's why I'm making 3D, right? But the important part is the price point, so it catches the students, and on the enterprise level people are actually using it in industry for architecture and for making cars. And Audi has a good case study for this, and I believe so does Rolls Royce. Yeah. But the main point is create getting developers for entertainment, because I believe Jennifer is absolutely right that with Oculus is that people want to be entertained, people want this escapism, and outside of the escapism comes people being able to develop good programs, and these programs will solve a need, right? Because after you're in Oculus for so long, or once we pass the threshold of the 30 minutes or the 2 hour mark, then it's, can I be relaxed? Can I do my transcendental meditation in Oculus and be in a different world? And that's the type of level that we're going to go to when we start talking about solving problems. Can I do my psychotherapy in Oculus? And on that level, it's just the passing the threshold of being able to wear them for so long. So I see that actually happening within the next 5 years easily, and just making them smaller, etc. Like, we're gonna keep going through these iterations. But seriously, I do take Oculus serious, and the price point is pretty perfect. And next generations are easily going to be in the thousands, and people are going to want to have them more than they want to have this level of Oculus.
I
Hi, this
also
is
think
Look,
I
Elle.
paid
the
fifteen
problem with
hundred
Google
for
wait,
Glass
wait,
was
whoa,
that
whoa, whoa,
because
whoa,
the
Eric,
voice
Eric,
activation and all the
Eric,
other
whoa,
features,
whoa.
there was a funny nickname given to people.
Um,
They were called glass holes. So I think that was kind of a meme that doomed that product to the enterprise indefinitely, in my opinion.
Eric, your mic.
exactly.
Hi,
That's
this
why
is
I quit
Elle. So,
wearing them, but I love them,
okay, so
and I
this is
paid $1,500 for them.
all right. So this is Elle. So at the CES, if you look at my picture, there are actually set from Japan to Korea, but Korea dominated. There are several companies doing those AR glasses, and they do have those practical, functional look. Um, Applications. This is just one of them. So of course, they were marketing it to the gaming community where you can attach it to your tablet, your PC, your phone, whatever, and you can play games as well as attach it to the console and do the AR thing. But you can also use it in construction, which was the other piece too, for safety, for communications, and they actually did like a demonstration of that. But they actually are doing this. It's just not well known. But at CES, there's several companies that were marketing AR glasses that actually looked pretty decent. So this is just one of them. This one, I think it was, I want to say they said 250 US, but I also want to say 400. I can't remember. I have to go through all my notes of everything, which I'm doing right now, trying to organize all this stuff. But here's just one.
And I
So I
see the
wanted to
use case
add in a
scenario.
couple.
I really wanted to see them making 3D models of anatomy because when we were learning about human body, it was very difficult to get a hold of a cadaver. And then because you need to learn every single artery or vein or muscle and their relationship to each other in order to
They
identify
demonstrated
them.
that at CES. It was a
Uh,
Japanese company. They demonstrated that in the biotech AR glasses that weren't specifically for medical, but they were utilizing it for that as well.
Okay, so the thing is, the idea is
Yeah, I
that
met
you
a
need to
company
learn
before.
everything in relationship to each other. So when you are performing surgery, you don't make mistakes. And when you have this 3D image in your mind, a lot of people don't have this capacity to create the 3D image in your mind. So it becomes really difficult when you are reading a 2D image on a book or something else, and then you're operating on a real life human body. So when you have this capacity to observe something in 3D, and especially with the wrist sensors and with your eyes together, the capability of putting your hand in a 3D model, moving structures around, opening spaces so you can reach underneath inside when you're doing surgery, that kind of experience only happens when you are actually performing surgeries, especially the micro those things you use for increasing your vision and stuff, especially when you are doing a microvascular surgery. I see this kind of application training surgeons for a better outcome, perfection in their technique, and also reduction of a lot of mistakes that can happen. So for education purposes, for learning, for training, for surgery, and even for younger children, for kind of a 3D models of, for example, animal GI system or cellular structures. So it can be a really fun way to learn and educate.
Google Glass was doing that, teaching surgeons that way in 2014. I mean, I just don't understand what happened to that project.
Yeah, you see, Dr.
Me too.
Francine, with that, what's so interesting about that, and it's actually in 2014 where my class, like my graduating class, we were actually trying to build these two scale models of 3D anatomy and building them in like places like Maya and ZBrush. It's actually so intensive, and being able to know how to create something to scale is like from scratch. I'm talking about, right? There's a difference where you're working from a model and you're live drawing it, but when you start talking about knowing muscles and insertions and being able to build those two scale models and understanding that muscles fold and are able to and go inside each other and all of these other things and stretch and pull, being able to create such a structure that is not stiff but can actually move, and you have the muscle deformations, that is one of the most critical parts of 3D animation, and is not shown ever in movies or anything like that because it's almost impossible to replicate. And even if you try, you enter the uncanny valley. So there's not a real reason to do it in movies, but obviously I understand what Aaron's saying, right? But at the same time, me understanding from a book and me going to live drawing, I actually was watching these doctor videos online before there was any of these resources that we have, right? And seeing doctors go through cadavers and watching those YouTube videos. But aside from that, being inventive enough to make a full scale human model, not just bones, but muscles and anatomy and tendons, all of these things, ligaments. That
Not only the
is,
muscle structure, but I'm talking about the
yeah,
neurostructure
I'm
because
talking
the
about
brain,
everything.
the
Being able
brain
to. create
The
all of
brain
that
itself
is
is so complicated when you are doing performing neurosurgery. But if you are going through those microstructure using those micro instruments, if you don't, and normally you can practice on cadavers because the cadavers brain are totally different than the live brain with all the blood and stuff. Or if you are performing microvascular surgery in cardiac, related operations and stuff. I mean, those implication or usage is so phenomenal, in my opinion, and it can be driven from the 3D models. It doesn't have to be exactly on scale, because as long as you conceptualize the relationship of the structure front to back, right to left, top to bottom, and all 45-degree angles in a sphere, your outcome
yeah.
becomes much more better. Because I remember first time I performed the surgery on a patient's ear, the back of the ear, the mastoid cell structure was so different than I conceptualized it, and the way you need to needle through those small spaces to avoid nerve damage is very nerve wracking if you don't have the concept. Thank goodness I have the 3D concept, like the mind is that there, but a lot of my colleagues don't have that kind of concepts, and I believe that this technology can help us better understand the 3D relationship of internal human body, and can prevent a lot of mistakes.
I understand what
I
you're
I pinned
saying.
I pinned
The
a company on top
difference
of
with someone talking.
for your reference.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to finish my point quickly. I understand what you're saying, Aaron. The difference is when understanding what the scale of an ear is. Like, obviously, all ears are different, right? But if we're just even talking about that, you have to understand the whole structure of what a skull is and where all of the muscles are. And there's a lot of facial muscles, right? And when someone draws a face wrong, you can see, and the reason you can tell is because you look at faces all day, right? Think about all the profile pictures on stage. No one's showing their arm;
No, what
they're
I'm
showing their
saying is we
faces.
already we,
I
we
want you
already
to hear
learn
my
on
point,
this.
though, Aaron. Quickly, I want you to hear my
Yeah.
point. My point is building these things. Someone has to actually understand the whole head before they say, "I'm going to build an ear with the tendons." And because if you don't know where the insertions are and what goes into an ear, then there's really no point building it. And that's the point. Someone actually has to understand these things intimately, and there has to be a bridge between surgery, doctors, and all of these places, and plastic surgery as well. I feel like they're the ones that use 3D the most, and these animators and skilled practitioners that are creating these structures. Because the reality stands is there's a big reason why we're not using that, because there's a chasm between those two practices.
So
The
can I
issue
bring up
is
one
that
point that we
when
haven't
we
discussed just
Oh,
yet, really quickly?
can I finish
Because
my point? Sorry,
yeah,
Tina, I
sure.
apologize. When the books are written, our anatomy books, the doctors don't draw the pictures. Artists illustrate those pictures. Those artists are not anatomy professors. They are just artists. They see and then they draw. So similar kind of approach can be used for the 3D artist, where they can see the actual model, and then they can create that actual model's inspiration into the 3D world, just like they are creating a car, for example.
I would have to disagree with you wholeheartedly, because these people that draw these anatomy books are quite, they understand it consummately, and there's only a few of them. Like, if you actually try and research on YouTube today, there's quite a few people that understand anatomy consummately. So to say the people that are artists that draw them aren't anatomy professors, that's actually quite insultative. And the people that actually do it on a 3D level, the people that I know that are great at this, also understand anatomy consummately, and not just in the 2D level, but to understand the volume of certain structures. And I feel like you really need to go onto YouTube. Like, there's people like Ryan Kingsley and Watts Atelier that are doing this thing and trying to pass on the knowledge. Because trust me when I say understanding everything consummately takes years. It takes over 10, 20 years, and you're always redefining your skill level on this subject.
Yeah,
Hey,
medical illustration is a specialty profession. There are degrees, there are certifications in it. So medical illustration is not just artists; it's its own discipline.
Okay.
I want to say, hey, this is Elle again. So at CES, I keep bringing it up, and I can't remember the name of the company. I got to go through all the papers, but I collected it. There's a company out of Japan that actually showcased a AR glasses utilizing the help of a robot arm to perform surgery. Of course, they weren't doing it live there, but they showcased it there. I'll try to find the name of it in the stack of papers that I have, and I will send it out. But they actually did showcase a prototype, a working prototype at CES, under I think it was Biotech Japan. So somebody is working on this,
Okay.
Yeah,
and it
that's
looked like it
what
worked.
I'm saying. Maybe we can look into that
And
and
they weren't using 3D
create these trainings or special people who can maybe work in that department and create 3D structures. And maybe that's something we can expand upon because there is a possibility of creating 3D models for better understanding and learning.
Yeah, guys,
I jumped in
I
here a
just
little
want to
bit.
say real quick. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
So I missed the part of that. I got pinged back into the room. I missed the question or what was being posed, but we already can create 3D models from CT scans that can go right into the metaverse right now. That already exists. So I didn't understand if there's a question around that possibility about treating training modules. We already have those in the medical space.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you're a patient, you can actually get the raw data and look at it in VR or XR. In fact, I did that for my neck surgery, for my cancer surgery. I was able to get the MRI data and look at the tumor and see how the surgeons were going to operate. Very creepy to look at yourself that way, but it's been possible for a few years now.
Okay. I want to jump into the next headline, which is speaking of CES, as L was, that the smart home standard that's trying to unify all of the Internet of Things and hardware and smart home and everybody making consumer electronics. There's a major effort underway to try and unify them all so they all work interoperably, called Matter. And the headline from The Verge says that the Matter, which is backed by Apple, Amazon, Google, Samsung, and others, gained significant momentum at CES with 30 some companies showcasing support for this collaboration. The soon to be smart home standard gained momentum in Las Vegas, and that's good news for everybody, especially users and especially the smaller companies. It makes it much easier for them to play nice with all of the other platforms simultaneously. Like USB, by the way, works with all hardware manufacturers for the most part. So the next one is from the Wall Street Journal, which says they have sources that the Securities Exchange Commission is pushing for more transparency from large private companies, think unicorns, including increasing disclosures and tightening investor qualifications, meaning limiting who can invest in unicorns, for example. They have sources that's what's going to happen. Let's open the article and see what it says. Unicorn firms have a huge impact and absolutely no visibility for regulators, says SEC Commissioner Allison Lee. Well, yeah, they're not publicly traded. People rarely get burned by them. I think the whole this is kind of a consequence of that big trial that just happened with what was the company Theranos, where the investors got burned in that. And that got the SEC's attention that all these investors got burned. Private capital markets have become an increasingly popular way for companies to raise money in the United States in recent decades, allowing firms to acquire funding from institutions and wealthy individuals without the regulatory burdens of going public. The number of so-called unicorns, private companies valued at $1 billion or more, has continued to grow even amid the recent boom in IPOs. The SEC, Wall Street's top regulator, has begun work on a plan to require more private companies to routinely disclose information about their finances and operations, according to a semi-annual rule-making agenda, and people familiar with the matter. It is also considering tightening the qualifications that investors must meet to access private markets to invest in those companies, and increasing the amount of information that some non-public companies must file with the agency. Quote, when they're big firms, they can have a huge impact on thousands of people's lives with absolutely no visibility for investors, employees, and their unions, regulators, or the public. I'm not interested in forcing medium and small-sized companies into reporting regime. And by the way, this is ostensibly meant to, this move would help investors, perhaps most of all. But I can tell you, the investors in Silicon Valley probably don't want this to happen, honestly. Because they don't want to see startups get slowed down and dealing with more bureaucracy and red tape and everything else. And somebody just raised their hand in the Twitter space. Mr. Clerkin wanted to comment on that. So inviting Mr. Clerkin to speak on Twitter space to comment on that. Okay. So we'll see.
Hey Tyler,
Can I
can
ask
I
a question based
quickly
on?
say something? No, can I just make a very quick statement just to correct something from the
Sure.
article about what is being stated? I don't believe the Securities and Exchange Commission has any legal authority to regulate anything with private companies unless they've got publicly traded bonds, and they have to
Right.
have, and then there's a threshold and whatever. So I have no idea how this article even got to where it did
No, I
because
think
I
they
don't.
do,
Yeah.
Evan. I think they do if
Um.
they're defrauding investors.
My question,
O-
like that
Only
was.
only the anti-fraud provisions apply. But I mean, but that's a stretch, by the way. It's kind of like municipal bonds. It's like they can't regulate municipal bonds until after the fact. They could prosecute a municipal bond issuer for for fraud after the fact. But I mean, and there are also specific rules on municipal bond issuance. I don't. I think this looks very similar, analogous to somewhat to the OSHA vaccine case, where the Supreme Court's now hearing. What is the law? What did Congress actually authorize OSHA to do? Same thing's going to be here. What did Congress actually authorize the SEC to do? You have a completely private company, no publicly traded bonds. I don't know where the SEC gets off determining what disclosures you need to make. And quite frankly, there's less risk to investors the bigger the company, because usually financial failure. Theranos, different, but generally financial failure is not like a risk when you have a lot of money. Usually, where people get burnt on these small deals you've never heard about. So anyway, I'm done speaking.
No,
Yeah.
Evan, I wasn't
I
following
had
the
a
original
couple.
topic, but they can if you're defrauding, even if you're not public, if you're defrauding your investors, so your VCs, et cetera, um, materially defrauding them, SEC does have authority.
Yeah, I
After the
wanted to
fact,
ask a
Jennifer, not
question
before the
based on
fact.
this, which was
They have to prove fraud.
it's I think where the article is saying, and what, because my question literally was where are they asking for this transparency, right? And I read in the article it was pre-IPO transparency. So once someone is going to IPO, like I'm gonna read further into the article, but what I can gain from it is understanding what invest like it's exactly what Jennifer was saying, which was when investors are investing in a company, what the company actually does and probably how they make money. It said somewhere in the article there were a lot of companies that were trading below their IPO, etc. So it seems like the Securities and Exchange Commissions wants just better understanding and a better grasp of what these companies do, right? And not just in how they're getting investments and all of these other things, but the way that they structure their business and how they actually service the public.
Okay. Next article is from The Guardian, that EU data watchdog orders Europol to delete a vast trove of personal data it obtained unlawfully. Internal documents show Europol has around that's a shit ton of data, by the way. EU police body accused of unlawfully holding information and aspiring to become an NSA-style mass surveillance agency. According to internal documents seen by The Guardian, Europol's cache contains at least 4 petabytes, equivalent to 3 million CD-ROMs, or a fifth of the entire contents of the U.S. Library of Congress. Data protection advocates say the volume of information held on Europol's system amounts to mass surveillance and is a step on its road to becoming the European counterpart to the U.S. NSA, National Security Agency, the organization whose clandestine online spying was revealed by whistleblower Edward Snowden. Among the quadrillions of bytes held are sensitive data on at least 250,000 current or former terror and serious crime suspects and a multitude of other people with whom they came in contact. It has been accumulated from national police authorities over the last 6 years in a series of data dumps from an unknown number of criminal investigations. The watchdog ordered Europol to erase data held for more than 6 months, and it gave it a year to sort out what could be lawfully kept. The confrontation pits the EU data protection watchdog against a powerful security agency being primed to become the center of machine learning and AI in policing. The ruling is also exposes deep political divisions among European decision makers, the trade-off between security and privacy, and which, by the way, echoes rather perfectly the whole issue of encryption itself, which is a trade-off between security and privacy as well. The eventual outcome of their face-off has implications for the future of privacy in Europe and beyond. Yep. So, very interesting, that one. And a Chinese, from Bloomberg, a Chinese ed tech company, I didn't realize they were still around, called New Oriental, fired 60,000 of its workers. That's a very large ed tech company. That's how many employees Facebook has, by the way, just to give you some scale here. So this Chinese ed tech company, with the same number of employees as Facebook, that actually has more, because they fired 60,000 in 2021 alone. After revenue fell 80%, the biggest layoff disclosed since China began its tech crackdown. So Bloomberg covering the Chinese tech crackdown very interestingly. And what else?
The other part to that is just economically, right? I mean, that whole kind of control expression by the CCP in ed tech is going to have real, economic, serious, economic consequences. I mean, it's right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but they rather control the education of the next generation. So that's the news that I remember about the New Oriental is that they started to sell some agriculture product instead of education, but still they cannot survive. So they lay off.
Okay. So now we get into the fun tweets, as we always do. Like this one from Netta, that climate change could spark a rise in kidney stones. Higher temperatures caused by greenhouse gases will lead to an increase in cases of the painful condition known as kidney stones, report researchers from Children's Hospital, due to dehydration. Okay. Next up is from Thomas Tong, of a connection between eating better and sleeping better. The surprising connection. Research shows sleep and food are inexorably intertwined. If we don't get enough sleep, your diet suffers, and vice versa. Thank you for that, Thomas. And then Evan found this one, that European carriers, like phone carriers like Orange and Vodafone and 3 and whatever, European carriers seek to block the iPhone private relay feature. One of the major new iCloud features announced last year was something from Apple called Private Relay, which is essentially like a series of VPNs to obfuscate your device to marketers who want to get details about your device. That's why you use VPNs, and that's why Apple created this thing called Private Relay. And
goes to show that, I mean, telecom companies are as hungry for your data as big tech. I mean, big tech gets all the focus, obviously, but you know, the phone companies are sucking your data, whether it's broadband at home or your, you know, mobile traffic, trying to sell you more stuff.
Yes. Katerina found the next one from NPR that scientists are vacuuming zoo animal DNA out of the air. Researchers who detected environmental DNA, or what's called eDNA, in two zoos say the technique could one day be used to look for endangered species in remote locations. A key part of protecting endangered species is figuring out where they live. Now, researchers say they found a powerful new tool to help, which is vacuuming DNA out of the air. Katerina found the next one from Smithsonian that China's artificial sun project just broke another record for longest sustained nuclear fusion. Superheated plasma reached 126 million degrees Fahrenheit for 17 minutes, creating a microsun in a lab. Vinay found the next one that in Afghanistan's ambassador to China quits with colorful resignation note, revealing that the staff had not been paid. Yep. Good times happening over there in Afghanistan, who cozied up to China, and China doesn't seem to be really giving much support, it seems. So Katerina found the next one that researchers have identified a link between mishappen fast replicating proteins and accelerated cognitive decline. The findings shed new light on the development and progression of Alzheimer's disease, which would be amazing. The next one is also from Katerina from CNBC, that a researcher in Cyprus has discovered a new strain of the coronavirus that combines the Delta and Omicron variant called Deltacron. And
Fun times.
Yeah, another week, another variant. Self-healing nanomaterials usable in solar panels and other electronic devices. And that's one of the...
Sorry, quick point. The Delta Cron thing is an artifact. They contaminated sequences. It's not an actual new variant.
Okay, and
let me just add a little bit to that because it's really quite fascinating. What would have happened if it were real is that a single patient had both variants, infected with both variants, and they exchanged genetic information and came up with a whole new hybrid of the two or a chimera of the two. And Los Alamos Labs has a genetics team that over a year ago documented the fact that that does occur between variants. It has already occurred probably many times where they recombine with each other. I was struggling to accept the initial announcement that Deltacron had actually occurred for the reasons that Ellie mentioned, that's been counterfactual to the claim. But in addition, the differences between Omicron and Delta are so substantial, that would not likely be a place I would expect that kind of recombination to manifest with a new variant that would infect 20 some people very quickly, as they claim. So there was some plausibility deficits with the initial report, and what Ellie just reported confirms, I suspect, both of our suspicions.
And I mean, the thing is, recombination can easily happen if there's co-infection with two other variants, and because there's just so much of it around, that wouldn't be surprising. It's just that this doesn't happen to be real, but we could see something like this really happening.
Okay, next
We
up.
keep hearing these, variants that are like an intermingle between like I don't know, Omicron versus COVID versus flu. Now, I think we heard the flu COVID thing also happening. A lot of people don't understand that these are completely different families, and it's like two different kind of animals. and a rabbit cannot reproduce with an elephant. It's just like that. But this is, fantastic news for anybody who likes to be a little bit, more on the artistic side and, creative side. Just figure out things out and promote whatever, and become sort of like a trendy on Twitter or anywhere. And I think they're doing science a disservice, but we do need a way to differentiate between this kind of news and, real scientific news. And we can do that by just going to their sources. If, we get this information from like some shady account on Twitter, no, we're not going to believe you. But if we get this from like an official source, then maybe at that point we will even consider it. But that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
So on Flurona, really quickly, recombination between influenza and corona is not going to happen. They're just too, they're
Yeah,
categorically different.
I know.
But co-infection with influenza and coronavirus, even if it's Omicron, and even if it did turn out that Omicron were as mild as some people had hoped, the co-infection could be a very, very different story. So avoiding influenza is just as important as avoiding Omicron right now.
Absolutely.
I'm really glad to have Ellie say that, because there are some reports from some talking heads in public health nationally now saying no, it's not a thing. It's just a coincidence you get both at the same time. It is a thing in that the severity of either illness could be amplified in a nonlinear way with infection with both, particularly because both of them can impair your immune system vis-a-vis the other. So the upshot of this, it comes back to Ellie's mantra: wear a mask, an N95 or better, socially distance. If you do end up getting both at the same time, it will be a memorable experience, and not in a good way.
And right
Yeah,
now
and
it
when
looks
people
like
say that Omicron is less deadly than Delta, even though it is, it's kind of like saying Jeff Bezos is poor compared to Elon. I think they both deserve our attention and our respect in navigating kind of diseases that can become very serious in some individuals.
And
And
also, let's go ahead, John. I'm sorry, I was going to probably tee you up anyways.
no, go ahead, David.
No, just in terms of re-anchoring what COVID needs to be about, which is that it looks like it's just birthing a whole new chronic disease that could be on the scale of, you can refine this, diabetes or something with respect to the long COVID. And there's a UK study that's basically stating that, is it 1 in 2 people who get COVID have symptoms that persist, i.e., long COVID, that is, basically could be like little some degree of brain damage or kidney damage and things like that. And John, please, if you could, if you care to refine
Yeah,
that.
no, my mantra on this one, apropos to Ellie's mantra on masking, is save your brain, wear a mask.
and
Okay,
and I reemphasize that, and I'll also mention, in the next 2 weeks, the medical care system in the U.S. could really buckle under the load. So, a high quality mask for the next 2 weeks is like civic duty.
on that topic, Evan found the next one that long COVID still a threat after mild infections, researchers warn. As the world grapples with the rapid spread of Omicron, a daily recorded cases reach frightening levels. A handful of new studies suggest that long COVID is still a threat after just mild infections. And that went out to the Tech News Twitter account. The next one from our friend Amay, that German neobank N26 is launching cryptocurrency services. Berlin-based neobank N26 plans to launch cryptocurrency services by the end of the year, along with everyone else. And a Zurich court in Switzerland rules that Uber drivers are not independent workers. The latest ruling on the U.S. ride-hailing firm Uber comes as a national framework to determine the status of gig economy workers in Switzerland. It says Uber drivers are not independent; they should be employees. And from Chetna, from Bloomberg, Japan's Panasonic joins global trend towards 4-day work week. Panasonic is introducing an optional 4-day work week, one of a small but growing number of Japanese companies joining the global trend of 4-day work weeks. And the next one is also about from the New York Times that in cities hit early by Omicron, deaths have begun to spike. It is still too soon to predict the full impact of Omicron could have on deaths and illness across the US, but data in New York City, Boston, and Chicago are beginning to show what the future could hold. That, 21 days after the spike for Omicron, they start seeing the corresponding spike in deaths and ICU visits, and that's a huge problem. That's a huge, huge, oh shit problem. It means it's perhaps not as mild as one had hoped.
Everybody reacted to the guidance that healthcare workers who didn't have symptoms can go to work. Obviously, that's a difficult decision to make, but they did it because they're scared that the system's going to break down if they don't.
So the next one, who sent this in just now? Oh, Pierre, who makes Club Deck, by the way, that I use for managing clubhouse rooms.
Hi, Pierre.
Hey, Pierre, and by the way,
Hey there.
Clubhouse is now working to do a kind of host app for hosting clubhouse rooms, very ostensibly and sort of in the same vein as Club Deck. And if they haven't given a serious consideration, I think they should. I think they'll be very pleasantly impressed with what Pierre has done with Club Deck. I've been using it and loving it, and not just the product, but the incredible speed with which Pierre is able to add pretty every function and feature that hosts have asked for from the beginning. And they update it daily, and it's lovely. And it might afford Clubhouse the ability to multitask and have continue to make the progress they want to make on the mobile app while simultaneously having a desktop app for hosts and whatnot. Anyway,
They have things that we still don't have on the Android app. So
right,
that tells you a lot.
Right. So Pierre sends in this article that from Reuters that Danish intelligence chief, which is like the boss of the FBI for Denmark, is being held over suspected information leaks. The head of Denmark's Foreign Intelligence Unit, Lars Finsen, has been remanded in custody over his involvement in a case involving a leak of highly classified information. 4 current and former employees of Denmark's 2 intelligence services were detained in December for leaking highly classified information, and Finsen is the only one who remains in custody while the investigation continues. The news, reported by local media, emerged at a court hearing on Monday. Quote, "I want the charges brought forward and I plead not guilty. This is a completely insane," Finsen told reporters at the hearing, where a judge will also decide whether Finsen will stay in custody. The case, about which authorities have published very little information, is being conducted behind closed doors, meaning that the exact charges and nature of the leaked information has not been made public. According to the local news, which cites unnamed sources, the case revolves around leaks of classified information to Danish media outlets. Very interesting. Okay, so the last one for today, as we're nearly approaching the 2-hour mark, is from our friend Poppy in Australia from the Daily Mail that a cattle farmer, has fitted his cooped up cattle with virtual reality goggles to make them think they're outside in summer pastures, which is apparently leading to higher milk production for these happier cows who believe they're... Yes, there we go. That's the future we're looking for, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's such a relevant point to our earlier discussion on the loss of the engineers from Microsoft to Facebook. The interoperability, as we discussed in previous sessions in the metaverse, is going to take a long time, if ever, because there are so many data parameters. And so the first to conquer specific use cases within their walled garden is going to stake out a pretty big territory by being the first mover. And the
You, wait,
question,
wait, do
the
you mean?
question,
I think you
no
mean
pun
first.
intended,
Right. Okay. First mover. Okay. I got
no pun intended, as the first mover.
I'm more
Uh,
a fan of AR for cows. I think VR
yeah,
is going
but
anywhere
but
for cows.
the point I neglected to make in the earlier discussion today is that given the amount of investment, given the usability issues that Dr. Francine and others have talked about, when someone cracks the nut around usability and comfort and not looking like a crazy geek when you're wearing a headset, it's going to be across every vertical. I mean, this illustration of a first mover in the cattle industry could be profound, and it sort of illustrates we can't even imagine how many very lucrative use cases there are across verticals outside of gaming, outside of healthcare, outside of upskilling, outside of education. It's going to be a really, really huge marketplace. So the first mover advantage and the challenges of getting to interoperability makes that first land grab become very, very critical.
Okay, but the future of the image that came to my mind of this as the future of like dairy was like the secretaries in Brazil that had the robots like typing, moving their hands to type for them. The real future is cellular agriculture, and tissues that produce dairy milk that will be more ecologically efficient, or have fewer ecological impacts and be more energy efficient, and have a bunch of other benefits like not needing to have so many animals in industrial animal agriculture at all.
it. Study revealed by the farmer did a study, and the study revealed reduced anxiety and improved overall emotional mood in the herd. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food in Moscow, the hardware was developed by taking a human VR headset and molding it to the specification of the animal's head. IT specialists then tweaked the color palette in the software to make it more suitable to the animal's unique vision, because cows can't see red or green and only perceive dull shades of yellow and blue. The Ministry of Agriculture referred to Dutch and Scottish research findings that environmental conditions have a significant impact on cow health, and as a consequence, the quality and quantity of milk produced. And the farmer, who had previously played his 180 animals classical music to relax them, added that he plans to buy 10 more headsets.
Tyler, also, as Ellie pointed out, there are competing stakeholders here. So if you look at like, the agribusiness, especially in the U.S., I mean, trying to put cows outside is the least. I mean, it's the conditions themselves, whether they, have glasses on or not. They're all held super tight in, unsanitary conditions. And Ellie pointed out there are better ways to approach, the future of food, but again, there are definitely different stakeholders who have their own interests at their own interest basically. And the
Yes.
other one is, look how expensive this would be. This could never, I mean, I this is an interesting use case because people need to understand agribusiness isn't your neighbor's farm. Agribusiness is huge, and there's very few small farms, especially in the U.S., left. But and they are one of the biggest verticals. But this is an incredibly costly approach. VR glasses on every cow. So
Yes.
I
there's
think
just other ways for more humane farming.
But
an
Jennifer,
alternative interpretation, and I agree with you, Jennifer, that with today's technology, it'd be prohibitively expensive. But wouldn't it be fascinating if embracing this use case as a way to commoditize and democratize the costs of the glasses themselves that are good enough might be very interesting.
right,
And don't
but
forget the
also,
chickens, the red contact lenses. I
But
say it in pun.
would we not then have,
Someone in the audience just noted my pun of stakeholders. That was pretty funny, Kevin.
right? But then would we not have a new classification of animals where you have free range and then animals who think they're free range?
Yeah, but those are all like bogus anyway. Honestly, a lot of those classifications right up there with organic or real fruit. So, um, yeah, good call, Tyler. And John, back to your point. Yeah, not. I don't know that I believe in this use case, but as you said, there are going to be varying use cases, and people are all over the board on this stuff that will come up with good enough and good enough for what uses. So, it's a good point.
Yeah, well, we may see a huge conflict between the first movers and the stakeholders.
And they're virtually free like the rest of us.
Oh, that's hilarious.
All
I
right.
mean, I just coming from Accenture, where we have everything was done by vertical. It was really interesting to see which verticals had a lot of money to put into technology, and agribusiness is one, mining is another. There's a lot of areas that people don't readily come to mind. Another pun, mind. Anyways,
Okay, everybody. We will meet you next tomorrow, same time, same place, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Drink
Thank
lots
you.
of
Bye,
water.
all.